Woman dumps boyfriend for being a janitor, but years later, she sees him on TV as a billionaire. Sofia Martinez had always envisioned a glamorous life. Raised in a middle-class family in New York, she had spent her teenage years daydreaming about luxurious vacations, designer clothes, and fancy restaurants. She wanted success, and more importantly, she wanted to be with a man who could give her the life she desired. At 22, she started dating Daniel Carter, her college sweetheart. Daniel was kind, hardworking, and deeply in love with her. He had an entrepreneurial spirit and big dreams, but no financial stability. After graduation, while Sofia landed an entry-level marketing job, Daniel struggled to find work in his desired field. To make ends meet, he took a job as a janitor at a high-rise office building. "You're better than this, Danny," Sofia said one evening when they met at their favorite coffee shop. "You have a degree. You should be doing something big with your life." "I know, babe," he said with a tired smile, "but I have a plan. I'm working on a startup idea. I just need some time." Sofia sighed. Time. How much time? She had dreams of marrying a successful man who could afford weekend getaways, fine dining, and a penthouse apartment. She didn't want to wait around for someone who was still sweeping floors. A few weeks later, Sofia met up with her best friend Olivia for dinner. Over cocktails, Olivia mentioned that her boyfriend had just bought her a diamond necklace. "How's Daniel doing?" Olivia asked. Sofia hesitated. "He's still working as a janitor." Olivia's eyes widened. "A janitor? Girl, you need to upgrade. You're young, beautiful, and smart. Why are you wasting your time?" The words stung, but deep down, Sofia knew Olivia was right. That night, as she lay in bed, she thought about her future. Was she really going to wait years for Daniel to make it? What if he never did? The next evening, she met him in the park where they often sat and talked for hours. "Daniel, I think we should break up," she said, avoiding his eyes. His face fell. "What? Why?" She sighed. "I love you, but I just don't see a future with you. I want more out of life. I want security, success. And I don't think we're on the same path." Daniel was heartbroken. "Sofia, I know I'm not rich right now, but I have a plan. I just need you to believe in me." "I'm sorry," she whispered before walking away. Sofia threw herself into her career. She started dating men who fit the image she wanted: lawyers, bankers, entrepreneurs. None of them made her feel the way Daniel had, but they had money, and that was what she wanted. Meanwhile, Daniel disappeared from her life. She heard rumors that he had quit his janitor job and moved out of state, but she didn't bother keeping tabs on him. Years passed, and Sofia climbed the corporate ladder. By the time she was 30, she was a marketing director for a major firm. She had the lifestyle she had always dreamed of: expensive clothes, a high-rise apartment, luxury vacations. But something always felt missing. One evening, Sofia was sipping wine in her penthouse apartment, absent-mindedly flipping through TV channels. Suddenly, she froze. The screen showed a business conference. The camera zoomed in on the keynote speaker, an impeccably dressed, confident man in an expensive suit. The name at the bottom of the screen made her heart stop. Daniel Carter, CEO of Carter Tech, net worth $2.3 billion. Her glass nearly slipped from her fingers. Daniel? Billionaire? She stared at the TV in shock. The same Daniel who had once mopped floors was now one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the country. The interviewer praised him for building a tech empire from nothing. Daniel spoke about how he had started his first company with only a few $100s and turned it into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. The interview ended with the host asking him if he had any regrets. "Not really," Daniel said with a confident smile. "Everything that happened, every setback, every loss, it all led me here. And honestly, I couldn't be happier." But just before the camera cut, Sophia swore she saw something in his eyes, a flicker of pain. Sophia couldn't shake the feeling of regret. She started researching Daniel online, reading every article, watching every interview. He had become one of the most eligible bachelors in the business world. He was dating a stunning model. A sinking feeling settled in her stomach. That could have been me. Finally, she gathered the courage to send him a message on LinkedIn. "Hey, Daniel. It's been a long time. I saw your interview on TV. Congratulations on everything you've accomplished. Would love to catch up if you're ever in New York." She stared at the message for a long time before pressing send. Minutes turned into hours, hours into days. No response. A week later, she received an invitation to a high-profile business gala. To her surprise, Daniel was listed as the keynote speaker. This was her chance. At the gala, Sophia dressed in her most elegant gown. As Daniel took the stage, the entire room fell silent, captivated by his presence. After the speech, guests swarmed him, eager to speak to the billionaire entrepreneur. Sophia's heart pounded as she approached him. When their eyes met, she saw a flicker of recognition and something else. "Daniel," she said breathlessly. He smiled politely. "Sophia, it's been a long time. You look amazing," she stammered. He chuckled. "Well, I finally got out of that janitor uniform." The words stung. She swallowed hard. "I just wanted to say that I'm really happy for you. I just wanted to say that I'm really happy for you. I see now that I was wrong to give up on you." Daniel studied her for a moment. "You weren't wrong, Sophia. You just didn't believe in me. And that's okay. I needed that rejection to push myself harder." Her heart ached. "I made a mistake," she admitted softly. "I wish I had been patient." Daniel gave her a sad smile. Life doesn't wait for people who regret their past choices. It moves forward. I did too. Just then, a beautiful woman approached and placed a hand on Daniel's arm. His fiancée. "Are you ready, babe?" she asked. Daniel nodded, giving Sophia one last glance. "It was good seeing you, Sophia. I hope you find what you're looking for." As he walked away, Sophia felt a wave of emotions crash over her. She had chased wealth, but in the end, she had lost something far more valuable. She had lost the man who truly loved her. And this time, there were no second chances. As Sophia watched Daniel walk away, hand in hand with his fiancée, a sharp pang of regret settled in her chest. She had spent years chasing the idea of success, of luxury, of a picture-perfect life. And yet, standing in the midst of this high-profile gala, surrounded by New York's wealthiest elite, she had never felt more empty. She walked toward the bar, ordering a glass of champagne, but the bubbles did little to lift her spirits. As she took a sip, she overheard whispers from a group of attendees nearby. "Did you hear Daniel Carter just signed a multi-billion-dollar contract with the government?" one man said. "Yeah, he's practically untouchable now," another added. "And to think, a few years ago, he was nothing. Just some janitor." The words stung. Just some janitor. That had been her exact thought all those years ago. But Daniel hadn't been just a janitor. He had been a dreamer, a visionary. She had abandoned him because she couldn't see his potential. She turned her attention back to him across the room, watching as he laughed with his fiancée and a group of investors. He looked genuinely happy, content. He had moved on while she was stuck in the past, suffocating under the weight of her own choices. For weeks after the gala, Sophia couldn't stop thinking about Daniel. She tried throwing herself back into work, going on dates with wealthy businessmen and surrounding herself with distractions. But nothing felt right. One evening, as she scrolled through her phone, she came across an old photo of her and Daniel. They were sitting on a park bench, laughing, his arm wrapped protectively around her. She remembered that day so vividly. They had been broke, splitting a cheap takeout meal, talking about their dreams. He had told her that one day he would build something great. She had laughed. "I believe in you," she had told him then. But she hadn't meant it. Not really. She put the phone down and sighed. Maybe it was time to face the truth. She had lost Daniel not because of fate, not because of bad timing, but because of her own choices. And there was no going back. Months later, Sophia was at a business conference in California when she unexpectedly ran into Daniel again. This time, it wasn't at a glamorous event or a high-profile gala. It was at a panel discussion on startups and innovation. Daniel was one of the keynote speakers, but what shocked her the most was that he wasn't alone. He was on a panel with other self-made entrepreneurs, and they were discussing something she had never expected: giving back. "As much as I love building businesses," Daniel said on stage, "my biggest passion now is mentoring young entrepreneurs. I remember being underestimated, being told I wasn't good enough. And now I want to help others prove the world wrong." The audience erupted in applause. Sophia watched in awe. He wasn't just a billionaire. He was a leader. He was making a difference. After the event, she found the courage to approach him one last time. "Daniel," she said softly. He turned around, surprised. "Sophia." She smiled nervously. "I swear I'm not stalking you." He chuckled. "Good to know." She hesitated before saying, "I wanted to tell you something. Not to change anything, just for closure." He nodded, waiting. "I was wrong," she admitted. "Not just about you, but about everything. About what success really means, about what happiness looks like. And I wanted to say I'm sorry." Daniel studied her for a long moment before nodding. "Thank you, Sophia." There was no anger in his voice, no resentment, just peace. "Are you happy?" she asked. He smiled. "Yeah, I am." She took a deep breath and nodded. "That's all I needed to know." As she walked away, she felt lighter than she had in years. Because for the first time, she understood sex wasn't about wealth or status. It was about purpose. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late for her to find her own. A year later, Sophia had changed. She left her corporate job and started working for a non-profit that helped young entrepreneurs get funding for their businesses. She stopped chasing luxury for the sake of appearances and started looking for meaning in her work. One day, she received an unexpected email. From Daniel Carter. Subject: Proud of you. Hey, Sophia. I heard about the work you're doing. It's incredible. I'm happy for you. Wishing you all the success in the world. She smiled. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel regret. She felt hope, because the future was still unwritten. Sophia sat in her modest new office, a far cry from the high-rise corner suite she once occupied. The nonprofit she had joined, Next Gen Startups, helped young entrepreneurs from underprivileged backgrounds gain mentorship and funding. It was fulfilling in a way she never thought possible. One afternoon, she was reviewing a grant proposal when her assistant knocked on the door. You have a visitor, she said. Sophia looked up, puzzled. Who? The door opened and in walked Daniel. For a moment, she just stared. He was as polished as ever, sharp suit, confident stride. But there was something different in his expression. Warmth. Daniel, she breathed, standing up. Hey, Sophia, he said with a small smile. I was in town for a business meeting. Thought I'd stop by. She motioned for him to sit, trying to ignore the way her heart pounded. I heard about your work, he said, glancing around the office. You're making a real difference. Sophia smiled. I'm trying. It turns out money wasn't what I was looking for all along. I just wanted purpose. He nodded. That's something a lot of people don't realize until it's too late. She swallowed hard. I was one of those people. Daniel leaned forward. I don't blame you for anything, Sophia. We were young. We wanted different things. But I should have believed in you, she admitted. That's my biggest regret. He studied her for a moment before shaking his head. If you had, I might not have become the man I am today. And you might not have found your own path. She considered his words, and for the first time, she realized he was right. They had needed to part ways to become who they were meant to be. "How's your fiancé?" she asked, changing the subject. Daniel chuckled. "Ex-fiancé, actually." Sophia's eyes widened. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know." "It wasn't meant to be," he said simply. She loved the billionaire, not the man. Sophia felt a pang of understanding. "I know that feeling." They sat in comfortable silence for a while before he finally stood. "I have to head out, but I'd love to stay in touch," Daniel said. "Maybe we can collaborate sometime. Help young entrepreneurs together." Sophia nodded, her heart feeling lighter. "I'd love that." As he walked to the door, he turned back one last time. "You know, back then, you were looking for someone who already had everything. But now, you're becoming the kind of person who builds everything on her own." She smiled. "Maybe I finally learned what really matters." And with that, Daniel walked out of her office, not out of her life, but perhaps back into it in a new way. For the first time in years, Sophia didn't dwell on what she had lost. She focused on what she was building. Because the past was written, but the future? That was still hers to shape. After Daniel left her office, Sophia sat in quiet contemplation. For years, she had been chasing happiness through wealth and status. But now she realized something profound: happiness was built, not bought. And for the first time, she felt she was truly building something meaningful. The next few months flew by as she poured herself into next-gen startups. She mentored young entrepreneurs, helped secure funding for innovative ideas, and even began speaking at events about her own journey, her mistakes, her regrets, and ultimately, her transformation. One evening, she was invited to a networking event for philanthropists and business leaders. To her surprise, Daniel was one of the key sponsors. Their eyes met across the room, and he made his way over. "Twice in 1 year," he teased. "People will start talking." Sophia laughed, shaking her head. "I think they'd be more interested in hearing how Daniel Carter is investing in nonprofits now." He shrugged. "I've realized that success means nothing if you don't use it to lift others up." She smiled, feeling a sense of admiration. "That's exactly what I've been learning, too." For the rest of the evening, they talked not as exes dwelling on the past, but as two people who had grown, changed, and found purpose in their own ways. Over the next few months, Sophia and Daniel found themselves crossing paths more frequently. Whether it was at business events, startup summits, or through mutual acquaintances, their worlds seemed to keep colliding. Then, one evening, Daniel called her. "Hey," he said. "I was wondering if you'd like to grab dinner sometime. Just us. No business, no work talk." Sophia hesitated. This was dangerous territory. "Like a date?" she asked cautiously. He chuckled. "I guess that depends on how the night goes." She bit her lip, considering it. Could she risk reopening this door? Then she thought about who they were now. Not the struggling janitor and the impatient girlfriend, but two people who had carved their own paths, found their own meanings of success. Maybe, just maybe, they could start again, this time on equal footing. "Okay," she said softly. "Dinner sounds nice." Months later, as Sophia and Daniel sat on a quiet beach during a weekend getaway, she thought about how much had changed. She glanced at Daniel, who was watching the waves, looking peaceful. "You know," she said playfully, "if someone had told me years ago that I'd be sitting here with you, I wouldn't have believed them." He smirked. "If someone had told me I never want to give you another shot, I wouldn't have believed them either." She nudged him, laughing. "Hey." But as their hands intertwined, she knew the truth. They had both needed to grow before they could find their way back to each other. This time, not as a man with nothing and a woman searching for everything ... but as two equals building a future together. Because real love wasn't about what someone had. It was about who they were. And this time, they were finally ready. As Sophia and Daniel rekindled their relationship, they both approached it with a newfound sense of wisdom. They had been through heartbreak, growth, and self-discovery. This time, things were different. There were no illusions, no unrealistic expectations, just two people who had evolved and found their way back to each other. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. One evening, as they sat at a quiet restaurant, Sophia hesitated before speaking. "Daniel, I need to ask you something." He looked up from his plate, sensing the seriousness in her voice. "Of course. Do you ever resent me for how I treated you back then?" she asked softly. He exhaled slowly, setting his fork down. "I used to," he admitted. "For a long time, I wondered if I wasn't good enough, if I was just meant to be overlooked." Sophia's chest tightened with guilt. "I never meant to make you feel that way." "I know," he said gently. "But in a way, your rejection fueled me. It forced me to push myself harder, to prove to myself that I was capable of more. And now, I don't hold any anger. We were young. We both made mistakes." She let out a relieved breath. "I just don't want you to ever feel like I'm here now because of who you became instead of who you are." Daniel smiled. "I know that. And the truth is, I wouldn't have wanted you back then. Not the old you. But the woman sitting in front of me now, she's someone I admire." Psha. Tears welled in her eyes as she reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "And I admire you too." Over the next year, Sophia and Daniel not only strengthened their relationship, but also became business partners in a new venture. Together, they co-founded Elevate Futures, an organization that provided funding, mentorship, and support for young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. Their story inspired countless people, especially those who had been underestimated, rejected, or doubted. One evening, Sophia stood backstage at a major entrepreneurship conference, preparing to introduce Daniel as the keynote speaker. As she peeked out at the packed auditorium, she smiled. "Ready?" Daniel asked, stepping up beside her. "More than ever," she said, beaming. As she walked onto the stage and took the microphone, she spoke from the heart. "Years ago, I thought success was about wealth, power, and luxury. I thought love was about status, but I was wrong. Success is about purpose. Love is about believing in someone, even when they have nothing." She turned toward Daniel, her voice filled with emotion. "And if you're lucky enough to get a second chance, don't waste it." The crowd erupted in applause as Daniel stepped onto the stage and pulled her into a hug. They had come full circle, not just in love, but in purpose. They were no longer just a couple. They were partners in changing lives. As Sophia and Daniel's organization, Elevate Futures, grew in success, so did their public recognition. They were often invited to high-profile events, featured in business magazines, and even interviewed on major television networks. One afternoon, Sophia received a message from an unknown number. "Hey, Sophia. It's been a long time. Can we meet?" Brandon. Her heart skipped a beat. Brandon was the wealthy businessman she had dated after breaking up with Daniel, the one she had chosen for his money and connections. The relationship had fizzled out quickly, as Sophia had soon realized he only cared about appearances. She debated whether to ignore the message, but curiosity got the best of her. When she met Brandon at a rooftop cafe, he was as polished as ever, expensive suit, designer watch, confident smirk. But there was something different in his eyes. "You look successful," he said, glancing at her elegant but modest outfit. "I never thought you'd leave the corporate world." Sophia crossed her arms. "People change." Brandon chuckled. "I see that. And I also see you've reconnected with Daniel Carter." She raised an eyebrow. "Why do I feel like you already know everything about me?" He leaned forward. "I keep up with business news. And let's just say, I regret letting you go." Sophia laughed, shaking her head. You didn't let me go. We weren't right for each other. Brandon sighed, then leaned in. Look, Sophia, I'll be honest. I made a mistake. I see what you and Daniel are building, and I want in. I have connections, funding, I could help take Elevate Futures global. Sophia stared at him, amused. You think this is about money? Brandon, we don't need your investment. We're doing just fine. He smirked. Everyone needs money. You don't have to pretend. She shook her head. You still don't get it. Money isn't the foundation of success purposes. And frankly, I don't think you'd fit into the vision, Daniel, and I have. Brandon's confidence wavered for the first time. So, that's it? You're choosing him over me? She smiled. I'm choosing the life I built. The one that actually matters. As she stood up and walked away, she felt an incredible sense of peace. Years ago, she might have been tempted by Brandon's offer, but now, she was exactly where she was meant to be. Months passed, and Sophia and Daniel continued to grow stronger, both as a couple and as business partners. Their work had expanded internationally, helping thousands of young entrepreneurs launch their dreams. One evening, they attended a charity gala, where Daniel was being honored for his contributions to business and philanthropy. As Daniel stepped onto the stage to accept his award, he paused for a moment, scanning the crowd. His eyes landed on Sophia, who was seated in the front row, smiling proudly. He took a deep breath before speaking. Years ago, I was just a janitor. I had big dreams, but no money, no status, and no one who believed in me, except myself. I worked hard, not just to prove others wrong, but to prove to myself that I was capable of greatness. And along the way, I realized something. He glanced at Sophia again, his expression softening. Success means nothing if you don't have the right people by your side. And tonight, there's one person in this audience who has taught me that more than anyone else. The crowd murmured, sensing something special was about to happen. Daniel smiled, reaching into his pocket. Sophia, could you come up here? Her heart pounded. People turned to look at her as she hesitantly stood, making her way to the stage. Once she reached him, he took her hands in his. Sophia, we've been through everything together, love, heartbreak, growth, and second chances. I used to think you walking away was the worst thing that ever happened to me. But now I realize it was the best thing, because it gave us both the chance to become the people we were meant to be. Tears welled up in her eyes as the realization hit her. Daniel slowly got down on one knee. Sophia, I don't just want you in my past or my present. I want you in my future. Forever. Will you marry me? The entire ballroom erupted in gasps and applause. Sophia covered her mouth, overwhelmed with emotion. She didn't even hesitate. Yes, 1,000,000 times. Yes. Daniel slid the ring onto her finger, and as he stood, he pulled her into a deep kiss while the crowd cheered around them. This time, they weren't just writing a new chapter together. They were writing their forever. Months later, the world watched as Sophia and Daniel tied the knot in an elegant but intimate ceremony. The wedding was held in a breathtaking vineyard overlooking the ocean, symbolizing their journey of growth and renewal. Only close friends and family were invited, but that didn't stop the media from covering what they called the love story of the century. As Sophia walked down the aisle, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. She was no longer the woman who had once valued wealth over love. She had found something far greater purpose, love, and a partner who believed in her as much as she believed in him. When they exchanged vows, Daniel held her hands tightly. I once thought success was about proving people wrong, he said. But now, I know true success is about proving the right people right. And Sophia, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You've shown me that love isn't about what we have, but about who we are. Tears streamed down her face as she replied, I spent years chasing the wrong things, thinking happiness came from luxury. But true happiness came when I learned to value what really matters. And you, Daniel, are what truly matters. With those words, they sealed their vows with a kiss, and the world cheered for them. As they danced under the stars that night, Sophia whispered, "I finally found my happy ending." Daniel smiled. No, this is just the beginning. Years later, Daniel and Sophia's legacy continued to grow. Elevate Futures became a global movement, helping thousands of underprivileged entrepreneurs break barriers and build their own success stories. They traveled the world together, giving speeches, mentoring young visionaries, and proving that second chances could lead to extraordinary futures. Sophia eventually wrote a book titled More Than Money: The Journey to True Success, which became a bestseller, inspiring millions to rethink their priorities in life and love. And through it all, Daniel and Sophia never forgot where they came from. One evening, as they sat on their balcony overlooking the city skyline, Sophia rested her head on Daniel's shoulder. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we never met again?" she asked. Daniel kissed her forehead. "I don't like to think about that. All I know is life gave us a second chance, and we made the most of it." Sophia smiled, intertwining her fingers with his. "Here's to second chances," she whispered. "Here's to forever," Daniel replied. As the city lights sparkled around them, they knew this was the life they had always been meant to build. Together. After their wedding, Daniel and Sophia decided that their next step wasn't just about growing Elevate Futures. It was about leaving a lasting impact on the world. One day, while visiting a struggling inner-city school, they spoke with students who had big dreams but little support. A young girl named Maya stood up and said, "People tell me I won't make it because I don't have connections or money. What do you do when nobody believes in you?" Sophia knelt in front of her, holding her hands. "You believe in yourself. And when you work hard and stay focused, the right people will find you. We believe in you, Maya." Daniel smiled and turned to the school principal. "How would you feel if we started a program right here? A fully funded mentorship and scholarship initiative?" The principal's eyes widened. "You're serious?" Sophia nodded. "More than serious. We want to make sure kids like Maya don't just dream big, but actually have the tools to achieve those dreams." Months later, the Carter Initiative was born, a nationwide program providing funding, mentorship, and internships for underprivileged students and young entrepreneurs. Within a year, thousands of students had opportunities they never imagined possible. At the program's grand opening, Maya, now a scholarship recipient, stood on stage with tears in her eyes. "I thought success was something only rich people could have," she said, looking at Sophia and Daniel. "But now I know success is something you create. And thanks to you, I finally believe I can." The crowd erupted in applause, and Sophia wiped away a tear. "This is why we do this," Daniel whispered to her. She nodded. "Because someone out there just needs a second chance." A few years later, life brought yet another change. Sophia and Daniel were expecting their first child. As they stood in their beautifully decorated nursery, Daniel placed a hand on Sophia's growing belly. "Our child is going to have everything I never had," he said softly. "Not just wealth," Sophia added, "but love, wisdom, and the understanding that success is about more than money." When their baby boy, Ethan, was born, Sophia and Daniel knew their lives would never be the same. Parenthood brought new challenges, but also deeper love and fulfillment than they had ever known. One night, as they rocked Ethan to sleep, Sophia whispered, "You think one day he'll want to take over Elevate Futures?" Daniel chuckled. "Maybe. Or maybe he'll choose his own path. Whatever he does, we'll support him, because we know that real success isn't about where you come from. It's about what you do with what you have." As they watched their son sleep peacefully, Sophia knew one thing for certain. They had built a life not just for themselves, but for generations to come. Years later, Sophia found herself sitting in a familiar place, the same upscale cafe where she once broke up with Daniel all those years ago. Only this time, things were different. She was waiting for an important meeting, one that would bring her journey full circle. A young woman in her early 20s approached the table nervously. "Miss Carter, I can't believe I'm actually meeting you," she said. Sophia smiled warmly. "Please, call me Sophia." The young woman sat down, her hand shaking slightly. "I read your book. Your story, it changed my life. I used to think that if I didn't come from money, I'd never make it. But you proved otherwise." Sophia reached out and held her hand. "What's your dream?" The young woman took a deep breath. "To start my own company. But I don't have the resources." Sophia smiled knowingly. "Neither did I. But you don't need money to start. You need vision, passion, and resilience." She slid an envelope across the table. "This is a grant from Elevate Futures. We believe in you. Now go make your dreams a reality." Tears welled up in the young woman's eyes. "Thank you. I won't waste this chance." Sophia smiled. "That's all we ask." As the young woman left, Sophia took a deep breath and looked around. Years ago, she had walked into this cafe and made one of the biggest mistakes of her life. Now, she had turned that mistake into a mission to help others. She had come full circle. And this time, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. As time passed, the influence of Elevate Futures grew exponentially. What started as a small initiative to help young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds became a global movement. The program now reached countries across Europe, Africa, Asia, and South America, with thousands of success stories emerging from communities that once had little hope. One evening, as Daniel and Sophia sat together in their office overlooking the skyline, they were interrupted by a young woman knocking on the door. "Sorry to bother you," she said, nervous but excited, "but I've been trying to meet with you for a while now. I wanted to personally thank you for everything you've done." Sophia smiled warmly. "It's never a bother. Please, come in." The woman introduced herself as Clara, a recent graduate of Elevate Futures who had just launched her tech startup. She had grown up in a small village where education and opportunities were limited, but her passion for technology and innovation led her to Elevate Futures, where she had been given the mentorship and resources to start her own company. "I can't believe where I am now," Clara said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I used to think my dreams were impossible. But because of you, I'm now running a company that's already creating jobs and changing lives in my community." Sophia's eyes welled up with tears. "That's exactly why we do this. You've taken the tools we gave you and turned them into something incredible." Daniel, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "And you're just the beginning. You're part of a generation that's going to change the world in ways we can't even imagine." Clara nodded, her gratitude evident in her eyes. "I never could have gotten here without you both. You've shown me what true success looks like. It's not about personal gain. It's about giving back and helping others rise." As Clara left the office, she turned to look back one last time. "I promise you, I'll do the same for others. I won't forget what you've done for me." Sophia and Daniel sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their impact settling over them. "I think we've done something really special," Daniel said softly. Sophia nodded, her heart full. "And it's only just beginning." Years later, as they celebrated the 20th anniversary of Elevate Futures, Sophia and Daniel were invited to speak at an international summit. This time, the crowd was even larger, the room packed with entrepreneurs, philanthropists, and changemakers. As they took the stage together, they were introduced as the founders of the movement that had transformed countless lives. The applause was deafening. Sophia took the microphone first. "When we started Elevate Futures, we didn't know exactly where it would take us. All we knew was that we wanted to create opportunities for people who had been told their dreams were too big. We wanted to prove that success isn't about what you have. It's about what you do with what you've been given." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. And as I look out at all of you, I see the future. I see leaders who will go on to build businesses, create jobs, and change lives, just as many of you were once given the opportunity to do. Daniel spoke next, his voice steady but full of emotion. Our success has never been about the money we made. It's about the people we've met along the way, the lives we've touched, and the change we've inspired. This movement isn't just ours, it's all of yours. The crowd stood in applause, and Sophia and Daniel exchanged a knowing look, the weight of their journey together hitting them in full force. As the summit concluded and they walked off the stage, they found themselves surrounded by the very people they had once mentored, now leaders, investors and innovators in their own right. One young man approached them, holding a tablet with a picture of a school in a remote village. "We built this school with the help of Elevate Futures funding," he said proudly. "And we're already planning to expand." Sophia's eyes lit up. "That's amazing. You're giving these kids the opportunity to dream big, just like you did." He nodded. "Thanks to you, I believe in the impossible. I want to pass that belief on to the next generation." And in that moment, Sophia and Daniel realized that their legacy wasn't just about the program they built. It was about the ripple effect they had started, one person at a time, one life at a time. As the years continued to unfold, Daniel and Sophia saw the true power of what they had created. Their children, Ethan and his younger sister, Isabella, had grown up in a world of privilege, but they were taught that true wealth was in what they gave, not what they had. One afternoon, while walking through the campus of Elevate Futures, Daniel turned to Sophia. "Do you ever think about what happens when we're no longer running things?" Sophia smiled, placing her hand on his arm. "I think about it all the time, but we've built something bigger than us. This is their legacy now, our kids, the next generation of leaders." As they sat down in the conference room, Ethan and Isabella, now teenagers, joined them. They had been involved in Elevate Futures from an early age and were eager to contribute their own ideas. Ethan looked at his parents. "I want to start a new program within Elevate Futures to focus on environmental sustainability. I believe the next generation of entrepreneurs will need to be just as dedicated to the planet as they are to their businesses." Isabella, with her creative mind, added, "I want to help connect artists with tech entrepreneurs. Creativity drives innovation, and I think we can create a space where art and tech come together to inspire new solutions." Sophia and Daniel exchanged a glance filled with pride. "You're already changing the world," Daniel said, his voice full of emotion. "We can't wait to see what you do next." As they sat together, hands intertwined, they knew that the torch was being passed, and that their work, their love, and their legacy would live on through the generations to come. As Elevate Futures continued to expand, the impact of their work was felt in communities around the world. Daniel and Sophia's mission had shifted from a local initiative to a global force, reaching millions of people in places they had never imagined. One particularly memorable trip took them to India, where they partnered with local organizations to provide scholarships and resources to young women eager to enter the tech and engineering fields. The opportunity to help break down cultural barriers for women in traditionally male-dominated industries was a cause close to Sophia's heart. They visited a small rural village where girls had been discouraged from pursuing higher education due to societal pressures and family expectations. Daniel and Sophia were introduced to a young woman named Priya, who had dreams of becoming a software engineer, but no way to make it happen. "I want to change the world with technology," Priya told them, her voice full of conviction. "But I need the opportunity." Sophia smiled and took her hand. "You already have the dream. Now you just need the tools. And we're going to make sure you get them." Within months, Priya became one of the first female students to receive a full scholarship through Elevate Futures' new initiative for young women in tech. Her journey inspired a movement that spread across the region, encouraging young women to pursue careers in STEM fields. As the initiative grew, Priya started her own tech company, focused on creating affordable technology for rural communities. She credited Sophia and Daniel for giving her the chance to realize her dream. On the night of the announcement, when Priya stood at the podium to accept the Elevate Futures Global Innovator Award, she spoke with raw emotion. Success is not just about what we achieve individually, but about how we lift each other up. I stand here today because someone believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And now, I will make sure that every young woman who dreams of becoming a leader has the same chance. The entire audience stood in applause as Priya's words echoed throughout the room. Daniel squeezed Sophia's hand. "This is why we do it," he whispered. Sophia nodded. "This is why." As Elevate Futures grew, so did its network. What started as a few partnerships in the U.S. expanded to collaborations with organizations, businesses, and universities around the world. The movement attracted world leaders, philanthropists, celebrities, and CEOs who all wanted to get involved in giving back. One evening, at a high-profile global summit, Sophia was invited to give a keynote speech about the future of entrepreneurship and social impact. As she took the stage, she noticed a familiar face in the audience, Brandon, her former boyfriend. He had been in the business world for years, but the look in his eyes was different. After the speech, he approached her backstage. "Sophia, that was incredible," he said, his tone full of admiration. "I can't believe how much you've accomplished." Sophia smiled politely. "Thank you, Brandon. It's been a long road." "I see that," he replied. "I remember when you and Daniel started this, and I thought it was a nice idea. But now, it's a global powerhouse." She raised an eyebrow. "You're not here to make an offer, are you?" Brandon chuckled. "Actually, no. I'm here because I want to help. I see what you're doing, and I'm convinced it's the future. I want to partner with you." Sophia was taken aback. She had never expected to hear those words from Brandon. "You want to partner with Elevate Futures?" Brandon nodded. "I've learned a lot over the years. It's not just about making money. It's about making a difference. And I think I can help take Elevate Futures to even greater heights." Sophia thought for a moment. She could feel the shift in the way Brandon was approaching this. It wasn't about status or power. It seemed like he genuinely wanted to contribute to something larger than himself. "You're right," she said finally. "We can make a bigger impact if we join forces. But this has to be about giving back, not gaining more for ourselves. Are you prepared for that?" Brandon's eyes softened, and he nodded. "I'm ready. Let's make this happen." Together, they formed a new global partnership that would see Elevate Futures partner with corporations and nonprofits worldwide to create sustainable economic growth, mentorship programs, and educational opportunities for people in need. As the years went by, Sophia and Daniel often found themselves reflecting on their journey. They had come so far from those early days when Daniel had been a janitor with a dream, and Sophia had been consumed by the pursuit of success at any cost. They had both changed in ways they hadn't expected. Daniel, once shy and unsure, was now a confident leader, known for his philanthropic efforts and dedication to social justice. Sophia, who had once been driven by ambition and validation, had become a powerful advocate for equity and opportunity. Their home was filled with the sounds of laughter from their children, Ethan and Isabella, who had grown into passionate young adults determined to leave their mark on the world. One evening, as the family sat down for dinner, Ethan asked, "Mom, Dad, what do you think your legacy will be?" Sophia smiled, looking across the table at Daniel. "I think our legacy will be about showing people that there's more than one way to succeed. It's about lifting others up, believing in second chances, and proving that no matter where you start, your future is yours to create." Daniel nodded. "We're just a small part of a much bigger story, a story of change, hope, and possibility." Ethan and Isabella exchanged glances before nodding in agreement. "That's something we'll carry forward, too," Isabella said. Sophia smiled. And you'll build something even greater. I believe in you both. As they finished their dinner, their family settled into a quiet moment, knowing they had created a legacy built on love, purpose, and the power of belief. They had truly changed the world, one dream at a time. Years had passed since Daniel and Sophia's partnership with Brandon, and Elevate Futures had only continued to grow. The global network they had built was now a beacon for social change, a model for how corporations could balance profit with purpose. The ripple effect of their work had begun to shape not only industries, but entire generations of young leaders dedicated to making a difference in the world. One day, while visiting a newly constructed vocational school in a remote African village, Daniel received an unexpected message. It was from an old colleague, someone from his early days as a janitor, who had kept in touch over the years. Daniel, you've been on my mind lately, the message read. I've been following Elevate Futures, and I just wanted to say you've changed everything. I remember when you were just cleaning floors, thinking about what could be. Now, look at what you've done. You've given people like me the courage to pursue our dreams. Daniel smiled as he read the message. It was a reminder of how far he had come and of the power of reaching back to help others rise. As they toured the school, Daniel and Sophia met with young students who had already started using the skills they had learned to innovate within their communities. One young girl, Zuri, had already built a small mobile app to help local farmers track crop health. I want to make sure that no one goes hungry because they didn't have access to the right resources, she said proudly. Sophia was deeply moved. You're doing what we hope for, using knowledge to give back. Daniel added, and just remember, you're not doing it alone. There's a whole network of people who believe in you. The success of the program in Africa was just one example of how Elevate Futures was reshaping communities. The initiative had inspired similar programs in Latin America, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. The network had become a lifeline for those with big dreams but few resources. Back in the U.S., as Elevate Futures reached new milestones, a familiar face reappeared in Daniel's life, Brandon. But this time, he wasn't just a former acquaintance. He had become one of the leading advocates for corporate responsibility and sustainable business practices. Brandon had spent years working within the corporate world, leveraging his position to push for greater equity in business. His values had shifted, and he had committed to aligning his work with the principles Daniel and Sophia had been advocating for since the beginning. He reached out to Daniel with an idea for a new project, one that would take their efforts to the next level. I think it's time we do something together, on a much larger scale, Brandon said during their first meeting in years. What if we partnered with some of the world's largest companies to make a permanent commitment to social responsibility? A global pledge where these companies give a percentage of their profits every year to educational programs, entrepreneurship, and social impact initiatives. Daniel, still in awe of Brandon's transformation, nodded slowly. That's ambitious, but it could change the way the entire business world thinks about success. Sophia, who had joined the meeting, added, it's not just about donating money. It's about a mindset shift, a new way of doing business where profits don't come at the expense of people and the planet. Together, they began crafting a plan for what would become the Global Business for Good initiative. The project would involve a network of global corporations that committed to using their profits to fund social and educational programs worldwide. As word spread about the initiative, companies began signing on, eager to align themselves with this transformative mission. They weren't just donating, they were integrating social impact into their core values, ensuring that future generations would have access to the tools they needed to thrive. The launch of the Global Business for Good initiative was a defining moment in Daniel and Sophia's journey. As they stood together at the event, announcing the partnerships with over 100 major corporations, Daniel couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. The launch of the Global Business for Good initiative was a defining moment in Daniel and Sophia's journey. As they stood together at the event, announcing the partnerships with over 100 major corporations, Daniel couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. Sophia placed a hand on his shoulder. It's all about planting seeds and watching them grow. We've created something that will last, something bigger than us. The crowd cheered, knowing they were part of something groundbreaking. As their children, Ethan and Isabella, grew older, they continued to be deeply involved in the family's work. Ethan, now in his early 20s, had developed a passion for the intersection of artificial intelligence and sustainable farming, while Isabella had been working on a project that would allow artists and creators from marginalized communities to showcase their work on a global platform. One evening, at a family gathering, Ethan and Isabella sat down with their parents to discuss the future of Elevate Futures. "We've been thinking about how to take the organization in new directions," Ethan began. "With AI technology advancing so quickly, I believe it could revolutionize how we approach agriculture in developing countries. It could help farmers increase their yields, conserve water, and reduce environmental damage. We could make it part of Elevate Futures." Sophia and Daniel exchanged a proud glance. "That's a brilliant idea," Daniel said. "It's exactly the kind of forward thinking we need to bring into the next chapter of this movement." Isabella chimed in, "And I think we should focus more on creating spaces for young creatives to not only showcase their work, but to be paid fairly for it. Artists in underserved communities need recognition and compensation. We can provide them with the resources and exposure they deserve." Sophia smiled. "It's incredible to see you both taking the reins, pushing forward with the values we've instilled in you." Ethan and Isabella looked at each other, ready to carry the torch into the future. "We'll make sure Elevate Futures continues to evolve and make a lasting impact," Isabella said confidently. With the next generation of the Carter family leading the way, Daniel and Sophia knew that the movement they had started would continue to grow and adapt, ensuring that its mission of empowerment, education, and equity would remain at the heart of everything they did. Years passed, and as Daniel and Sophia retired from the day-to-day operations of Elevate Futures, they spent their time traveling, spending time with family, and reflecting on their incredible journey. They had achieved everything they had dreamed of, and more. But what filled them with the most pride was the network they had built, the lives they had touched, and the knowledge that their work would continue long after they were gone. On a quiet evening in their home, as the sun set over the horizon, Daniel and Sophia sat on the porch, hand in hand. They looked out at the world they had helped change. "I'm proud of what we've accomplished," Daniel said quietly. Sophia smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "I am too. But the best part is knowing that we gave so many people the chance to create their own success." Together, they watched the sky turn from orange to purple, knowing that their legacy would live on, not just in the companies, scholarships, and programs they had built, but in the hearts of every person whose life had been touched by Elevate Futures. As time moved on, the world continued to change. Technology evolved, political landscape shifted, and social movements gained momentum. But the core values that Daniel and Sophia had built their lives around, empowerment, education, and equity, remained steadfast. They realized that the foundation they had created with Elevate Futures had become more than just a nonprofit or a network. It had become a movement. One afternoon, while visiting a new initiative in Eastern Europe, Daniel and Sophia met a young woman named Nadia, who had been directly impacted by the work they had done. Nadia was from a small village that had faced decades of economic hardship. With little access to education or job opportunities, many of the young people in her community had felt trapped in the cycle of poverty. But Nadia, armed with a determination to change her life, had joined a training program sponsored by Elevate Futures. "Without this program, I would still be in that village, working in the fields like my parents," Nadia explained, her eyes shining with pride. "But now, I'm the first in my family to become a software engineer. I've created a platform that connects local farmers to sustainable resources and helps them sell their crops directly to markets." Sophia's heart swelled with emotion. "You're changing the world, Nadia." Nadia smiled, but her eyes were full of gratitude. "No, you are. Elevate Futures gave me the opportunity to believe in myself. I want to pay it forward. That's what we do now. We build from each other's successes." Daniel's voice was thick with emotion as he replied, "That's exactly why we started this. To help people like you realize your potential." As Nadia continued to tell her story, the couple realized that the ripple effect they had hoped for was not only real, it was growing exponentially. What started as a small initiative to uplift underprivileged individuals had now become a global network of changemakers who were actively working to solve local and global issues. The greatest achievement is not in what we acquire, but in what we give. True success comes when we empower others to achieve their potential. The journey of Daniel and Sophia, from humble beginnings to global impact, proves that change is possible when we believe in each other. And the impact of our work can echo through generations as the cycle of empowerment continues. Every step we take to lift others is a step toward a brighter future for all.